Watching Kyle's unboxing videos again?
Yeah, he always finds the coolest... No way! A robot dog? Gotta ask where he got it.
Or use your Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Just draw a circle around the dog on your screen, and it shows you where to buy it right in the app.
Whoa, I just learned a new trick. And that for once, I beat Kyle to the next big thing.
Circle it, find it with the new Galaxy S24 Ultra and circle the search with Google. Get yours now at Samsung.com. Internet connection required. Results may vary based on visuals.
Hey there, Duke fans. Welcome to episode 329 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. I'm Jason Evans. I'm your host this week. It is Thursday, the 22nd of July, and we are getting really excited here about the possibility of the Olympics coming up starting tomorrow with a number of Dukies playing, including Jason Tatum and Jahlil Okafor. By the way, we want to congratulate the Milwaukee Bucks for winning an NBA title. This means that former ACC stars Jordan Nwora and Mamadi Diakite have both won rings. So a tip of the hat to the former Louisville and Virginia stars there. No Dukies on the Milwaukee Bucks, so that's a pity. But what we're doing today is we're presenting the third of our series of reports with Jay Bilas about the Dukies in the NBA draft. We're about a week out from the NBA draft at this point. We've already given you reports on DJ Stewart and Matthew Hurt. So it is time now for us to look at Jalen Johnson. This is a guy who stirs some very mixed feelings at best among Duke fans after he left the team in the middle of the season to focus on the draft, and his NBA future. And as you'll hear in our conversation with Jay, I asked Jay if he considers Jalen to be a member of the Brotherhood after the controversial way Jalen Johnson's career as a Duke basketball player ended. So not going to take any more delay, not going to waste your time anymore on anything other than listening to Jay Bilas. Here is our conversation with Jay Bilas about the NBA draft prospects of Dukie Jalen Johnson. So Jay, we appreciate it. We've heard from you in recent days, recent weeks about two other Dukies, Matthew Hurt and DJ Stewart. And that brings us to Jalen Johnson now, who has got the highest stock of any of the Dukies going into the draft. But boy, there's some real questions about Jalen Johnson regarding things that are not on the basketball floor. So let's start, though, on the floor. What does an NBA GM see in Jalen Johnson in his game that gets them really excited and sort of puts this guy in the conversation for the lottery?
A long arm transition athlete that operates very effectively in the open floor, and an excellent passer, a guy that can really pass, really high level vision, can handle it, and rebounds at a high level for his position. I think he can still improve as a defender and become tougher in that regard, but he's got a lot of tools, and I think he needs to be able to shoot the ball more consistently. But that's something because he does have, he's got good hands and he's got decent form. I think he can fix that. I think that can improve. You've seen with a lot of players over the years that don't shoot it at a high level in high school or college, that with a lot of work at the NBA level, they really become much better shooters. And there are countless examples of it. We have seen some that have gone the other way, where you thought they were going to, sort of using that logic, you thought they were going to get better, and a couple of them have gotten worse. One of them is Ben Simmons, but that's more a mental issue, I think, than physical. So I think Jalen can really improve his shooting to where you have to go out and guard him, because that wasn't the case in his first year, as a college player, even though it was cut short when he decided to opt out of the season. I think he can be a better shooter, but it's going to require some more work.
So I saw an interview with Jalen the other day where he said that the spacing in the NBA is going to work better for him than in college. There's more space, there's more room on the NBA floor, and that he's a guy who, you mentioned, he operates really well in space. Do you agree with that assessment? Do you think he's going to be better as a pro than he was as a collegian because of all that extra space?
Well, I mean, if he continues to improve, there may be, the spacing is better. I think the NBA does a better job of using more of the court than college does. because they've got more guys that can really shoot it. So you can space the floor, but really spacing the floor isn't the issue. It's stretching the defense. And if you can't shoot, you're not going to have guys they're going to be helping off you, and that shrinks the floor for a defense. So Jalen's still going to have to hit those shots. He may have more space, but guys are going to force him to make those shots rather than to put the ball on the deck and drive it, which right now he wants to do. He's still, excellent in transition, all the passing, all those things. But if you're not stretching the defense, you're not as valuable of an asset.
And we talked about, what NBA teams like when they see him. What are the red flags? What are the things that an NBA team sees? You've talked so much about the shooting. Is that the primary thing that they see and they go, oh, wow, I'm a little worried about this guy?
It is for me. And I think it would be for most NBA decision makers. But, the other thing that, I don't know if you call it the elephant in the room, it's the obvious thing is he stopped playing in the middle of the year or toward the end of the year and just decided he'd had enough. And that I think in any sport raises some questions. It doesn't mean those questions can't be answered in a positive way or it's disqualifying because he is really talented. And I didn't hear anybody, talking about how, Jalen lacked the, requisite skills for the NBA and all these things when he went to Pittsburgh and had, 24 points, 17 rebounds, however many assists he had, all those 4 blocks, whatever it was. I didn't hear other coaches say, hey, they'd be better off without him. When he was hurt, the issue was, when do they get him back? Because they need him back. And, really things turned, in my view, after the Miami game. So Duke went down to Miami, got beat. Jalen did not play well. He played better than some of his teammates, but, he didn't bounce back from that particularly well. I'm sure, there were some issues with the coaching staff, maybe putting him through the ringer a little bit like they do oftentimes, that if you don't do this, that, or the other, you're not going to play as much, or you're not going to start this game, and, trying to light a fire under players, that happens. And the fire didn't seem to get lit with him. That's not horribly unusual. He's not the first player that's happened with, but there aren't that many lottery picks that decide, but it was a pandemic year. There was a lot going on. And he decided to shut it down. I still haven't heard an explanation for it. All I've heard him say is it was the best thing for me and my family, but that doesn't make any sense to me. So if I were doing the drafting, I'd need to hear more about it. If it satisfied me, I'd take him as high as 7 or 8, because I think his talent level warrants that. I do think he'll be taken in the lottery, but it could be in the middle of the first round. It could be like 14 or 15. Because people might think there's some risk involved there. It's funny. He went to a number of different high schools, but that was only brought up as a negative when he quit. And, that's what all of this stems from. He quit, and athletics doesn't respond well to that. And clearly, some people, within the ACC that were critical of him, they didn't respond well to that at all. But that's fine. It's just now it's a question of which NBA team is gonna like him well enough to pull the trigger on him. Is it going to be 7, where I think his talent warrants him going, or is it going to be further down to the 14, 15 range? And I don't think there's any scenario where he drops out of the first round or anything like that. I think he's too good for that. But, you've seen guys like Michael Porter Jr., because of issues with his back, he didn't play much his first year at Missouri. And look what's happened. He was a steal at that level for Denver, and he's been producing at a high level very early in his career. I think Jalen, he doesn't shoot as well as Porter Jr., but he's got that kind of ability level.
So you address this notion that he quit. Let me ask you, both as an analyst and as a member of the Brotherhood, a former Dukie, is Jalen part of the Brotherhood? There are a lot of Duke fans out there who they say they understand if a player transfers or goes one and done. They don't really understand a guy who they feel like quit on the team in the middle of a tough season.
I mean, not to be flippant about this, but I don't even know what the Brotherhood means. It's a slogan, and so what is being in the I don't have my membership card. Maybe I'm not in it. I don't know. But to me, that doesn't mean anything for the draft, whether you're in the Brotherhood or not. That's a thing for Duke to figure out. And if the fans want to call him a member of the Brotherhood and don't want it, go ahead, do whatever you want. To me, that's meaningless, and it's certainly not going to affect the remainder of his career. There are guys that have played 1 year, played 3 years, whatever. It's an unusual thing for him to have made. And I think for anyone, in order to understand it, you'd want to have it adequately explained. And to me, it hasn't been explained, but I'm not the one he has to explain it to. I'm not drafting him. So he has to explain it to the NBA. And, the NBA is not going to ask him. Nobody's going to get him in an interview and say, hey, are you still a member of the Brotherhood? Like, we need to know. Nobody cares about that stuff. The only people that care are Duke people. And that's fine. They should care about it, but because it's their team and their Brotherhood. But it's not an issue for the NBA. They're looking at their future and what can Jalen Johnson provide to this franchise? What kind of an asset? And because he should be a long-term asset that pays off for a long time as long as he stays healthy. And I think he's very capable of doing that. But as you guys know, when you're talking about an 18, 19-year-old, I don't know how old Jalen is, whether he's 19 yet, but he might even be 20, but when you're talking about how old sort of a player at that age, you're dealing with different levels of maturity. So if he made a decision that showed some immaturity, he's not going to stay that way forever. There have been a number of players that have gone into the draft that their maturity has been questioned, and they mature, and they become they get older, they become better professionals. They're better able to handle adversity. And this was a level of adversity that frankly, I'd never fathomed before. You're isolated, living in a hotel since August and going through a very difficult season when there was a lot of criticism and a lot thrown at you. And it's not like you could sit down with your family. You couldn't even see your family. You weren't allowed. Your family wasn't allowed to come to the games, things like that. So, it made it for a very difficult, sort of difficult year. Now, do I think, is it a choice I believe I would have made or I would have recommended? Like, even if he weren't playing well or felt like his stock was being impacted, unless it was a huge negative on his mental health, I would have counseled, if I had been asked, finish the season out, because it raises a bunch of questions that are going to be hard to answer. And some people just aren't going to understand it. They can understand you not playing as well or having some difficulties, but people don't react well to quitting. And while we use the term opted out, made a decision, whatever, at the end of the day, the term quitting applies. And that's fine. We can say he quit on his teammates, or he did this, or he did that. He did it moving towards something, whatever the reasoning was. People are going to be able to say he quit, and they're going to want to be satisfied as to the answer. And I think that's the biggest thing. Can he satisfy people as to the reasons why?
So I want to get away from the court and talk about measurables for a minute, because in the case of Jalen Johnson, there are some really impressive measurables that we got from the combine. He has the biggest and longest hands of anyone who is measured at the combine. He had one of the best body fat percentages of anybody at the combine, which shows that he's been working out a lot and is in really good shape. How did the NBA look at those kind of stats on him? That's just the stuff on paper, and especially like those hands. I was marveling at the fact that this guy had the biggest hands of anybody at the combine. Is that an important thing for NBA GMs?
It is helpful. All those things about your body and athleticism are really important, because those are lasting things. Your size, your length, the size of your hands is important. Like Kawhi Leonard has huge hands. He can do what he wants with the ball, and can play sometimes with one hand. And I think that's very, very helpful. The fact that he is a very well-conditioned athlete is certainly helpful. So that's sort of the thing, Jason, that we're talking about, is that he checks every box on everything you want in a prospect. He's got it all. Like, look, he doesn't shoot it yet, but I say yet because I think he's going to be able to improve that. The only thing that you can really question is, does he, the want to part of it, and not finishing the season raises that question. Does he want it? Sort of the word, the thing that the NBA uses a lot. You hear it all the time. They say, does he love to play? Does the guy love to play? Because there are guys out there that are really good, and they don't, they're not willing to put the extra time in order to not just be good, but be great. These teams are going to be drafting and committing an asset being their first round draft pick, and they're also going to be committing a lot of money. And so they want to get the player to a second contract and have that pay off for them. And if you have questions there, is this player gonna really pay off? Believe me, those NBA people are going to ask it, and they're going to want to be satisfied before they draft. Otherwise, they'll go, this is a deep draft. There are other really good players that we can take here, and that present less risk in that regard. There's always talent that you weigh talent versus risk. And there's a point in the draft where you're going to go, okay, I get the risk, but the talent gives us reason to take that risk here. We wouldn't have taken it. Like I mentioned, Michael Porter Jr. That was a great, with the back issue, that was a great pick at 15, I believe it was. They might not have been as comfortable doing that at 6 or 7 because his talent level indicated or suggested that he should have been taken in the top 3. And Jalen Johnson, similar. He's not top 3, but he's top 7 as far as talent is concerned. But because of some of the questions and some of the perceived risk, it may put him down to 14, 15, maybe 20.
So, Jay Bilas, if you were a NBA GM, let's say you've got the 13th pick, last pick of the lottery, Jalen Johnson in your lottery, or do you go, you know what, I need something that's a little more of a sure thing? You said it's a deep draft. I mean,
he's in my lottery, but the question would be, Jason, if or for me would be, what if you get to 13 and it's between him and Keon Johnson at Tennessee, who's a spectacular athlete, and goes after people and can really defend, and he's got a really high ceiling. Do you do that when you don't have a question about, does he want to? And again, Jalen may have satisfied everybody as to that question. I haven't heard anybody talk about it, so I don't know. I only know what he said, when it happened, what he said in subsequent interviews, and then what he said to us at the combine. He was asked, I think I asked him straight out about it, and he just said it was the right thing to do for me and my family. And that didn't, to me, answer the question. It was an answer. It didn't answer my question. So the NBA in interviews, they're not going to stop at that. They're going to want to be satisfied on a deeper level than just that.
So we're now wrapping up our coverage of the NBA draft with you, Jay, and I want to do something with you that we do with all our guests. We usually ask them for a favorite Coach K story. You've done that with us before. I want to ask you for a favorite draft story. I want you said 19 years you've been doing this. Think back for me for a moment. What's like your best behind the scenes or favorite moment? And I hope it is Fran Fraschilla saying that Bruno Caboclo is 2 years away from being 2 years away. That's my favorite draft moment from the past decade, when he said he's 2 years away from being 2 years away.
Yeah, that was funny. I don't, I've got my draft stories usually come with did I make it to the end without having to get up and use the restroom, because it's 6 hours sitting there, and it's you have to manage your fluid intake to make sure you make it to the end.
They don't provide catheters. No catheters for you guys.
No, that old movie Semi-Tough back in the 70s would come to mind, but I haven't. I'm not sure that I have any draft stories. One of the funny things I think is when I always laugh when the picks get handed up to Reese Davis. They have this little toy arm, that you So you squeeze one end of it and it grabs a piece of paper. So they use that to hand up to him who the next draft pick is. And so he'll know maybe 10 seconds before it's announced so that he's ready to go. And the rest of us don't know. So the only way we would know is looking at Twitter when Adrian Wojnarowski puts it out. And so, the people at home knew who the pick is before we do. And every once in a while they'll ask us and we'll say, well, this team needs this. How about this guy? And well, they've already decided, Woj already knows. So I don't look at any of that stuff. It's just a kind of a weird night in that regard I know a lot of the NBA teams they'll have Twitter feeds of different people up on a big screen while they're going through the draft. That's the one thing I would love to take a year off of the draft before they fire me. But take a year off and sit in a draft room and watch how it works. Because I would love to watch that. Just love to see the information that they have to call at the last second. They've all done, mock drafts. So if this, then that. If this guy's available, we'll do this. But when everybody's under the gun and you're not sure why a player's dropping, they're looking for information, they're reading Twitter feeds and all that stuff. I would love to be in there to see all that.
Hey, when they hand the pick to Reese with the little, clipper thing, does his face, is he, perfectly stone faced, or does he ever give you a surprised look or something like that to clue you in that something crazy is about to happen?
He may, I don't know about the crazy. I don't remember him ever doing that. There have been times when one of us may have said, well, this is the pick. This is what the team should do. Or here's what I would do, something like that, where he'll get it and he'll look at you and go, something like that.
Give you the nod. Yeah.
God forbid, maybe you were right out of all the times we're wrong. But that's sort of the thing. There are two things that when you're a now they call us basketball analysts instead of, I remember when I used to be called a color man. He does color for ESPN. But there are two things you hate to be asked. One is when a team's in a huddle before they're going to take the last shot, when the play-by-play person says, what are they going to do here? Like I've been scouting this stuff. They're going
to try and make a basket.
The opposing coach doesn't know what they're going to do, so you have to come up with something there. And when they say, hey, what should the Jazz do with the 15th pick? Something like that. And you have to say, well, this is what they need, or all that. Here's the best available player and all that stuff. That's not a position anybody wants to be in, to have to be and especially when Woj probably told everybody what the pick was anyway.
So I'm surprised you don't have Twitter up there to see what Woj is doing. Oh man.
No, I don't. As you guys know, I don't follow anybody, but I do not want to be bothered by, not just to know what's going on, because there's nothing I can do about it. And I don't want it to shade any commentary I have, but I have a pretty good rule when I'm broadcasting is I do not look at social media while the game's going on or while the broadcast is going on, because I don't want to be, sort of influenced by what's trending. The only time I've done it, I did it a couple times. I think it might have been last year where maybe it was Jamin Brakefield came in and he scored a bunch of points in a row, and all at my age, all I could think about was, that's what Vinnie Johnson used to be, the microwave. And I can't call it microwave. It's an old technology. It has a microwave now. And so we started looking on Twitter for people saying, no, start calling him the air fryer or all these other things. They had we had a good time with it. We were looking for things to kind of enjoy ourselves because there were no fans or anything. The environments dictated that we had to do some different things this year. And so that was actually fun. So we've done a few things like that, but that's really the only time. And most of the stuff I got were text messages, actually, which led me to look at Twitter because of it, because I started getting text messages from my friends, a lot of them Duke players, former Duke players, saying air fryer, this is the new technology, yada, this, all the different, things that you can heat something up quickly, the hot pocket or whatever the hell it was. It was really funny. And it was funny who was sending them too. I didn't want to rat anybody out, but it was pretty funny.
Jay, thanks so much. As always, your contributions are witty and also knowledgeable. That is a great combination, and we love it here on the DBR podcast. We will have you back very soon, man, because there's so much more to talk about regarding Duke. Have fun at the draft with ESPN, and root on those Dukies. Hope they get their names called sooner than anyone expects. That's always a good thing.
Yeah, and root for me to make it through without having to run to the can while it's going on.
And big
anytime
gulps.
anytime you guys need me back to lower your ratings or tube the podcast, I'm available.
There's an endless well of NIL discussion that we have to have for you to show up and ruin. So
can you imagine the endorsements I would have had? I mean, I Pete Rinaldi's fried chicken. I would have been all over that.
We had an extensive discussion about this the other day because JJ Redick made a bunch of good points on Twitter about how he would ruin his own NIL endorsement money.
Blow it all on natty lights.
That's what he said.
Eyes on shirts. I thought I saw
with pop collars. Yeah.
It
was great stuff.
Wait, I have one more question. Now that Reese Davis is a Duke dad, is he now pulling for the Duke guys, or is he not like fully roped in on that yet?
Yeah, I did, to the Brotherhood discussion, I did tell Reese that now he's a member of the Brotherhood. So, whether he's gotten his t-shirt from Nolan Smith or what, he's now a member of the Brotherhood. And he's got now when he comes to Durham, he has to go to Krzyzewskiville and pay his respects to Coach K and all that stuff. He can't be the unbiased Reese Davis anymore. He's got to come over to the dark side.
He's locked in.
Excellent. Love it.
Thanks again, Jay.
Thank you, guys.
So again, our thanks to Jay Bilas for joining us to talk about Jalen Johnson. And guys, the elephant in the room in that conversation, I think, it's the question about Jalen is not the measurables or the athleticism or the skills. I mean, Jay talked about his passing, and I went back and I looked at some of Jalen Johnson's, highlights from last year. He's special when he's on the floor and got the ball in his hands. The elephant in the room is he quit on the team. And, Jay said the fact that Jalen has not been able to answer that question is a really big deal. Donald, I'll go to you first for reaction. Was there anything that you heard that as a GM, would make you say, yeah, it's worth taking a risk on a guy who transferred to like 4 different high schools and then quit on Duke midway through the season?
I would want to get him in a room, like Jay said, and ask these questions and not have him leave that room until I'm satisfied with whatever answer that he's given. That's the step one. I honestly don't know what that answer is, because we, just like Jay said, we've only heard the line of I did what's best for me and my family. And, even for Duke fans, a lot of Duke fans are like, yo, man, that's not enough. Like, why would you leave at this point? What was the timing? What was whatever that led to this decision being made? And does the team actually support it? Like, I mean, let's put it this way, right? For NBA draft night, you'll see, back when Kentucky was getting 5-6 guys drafted in the first round, Calipari was at every single table, right? Now, there were some Duke, Coach K is never sitting at any Duke players' table, but there's obviously a lot of players that he would have if given the opportunity, or if he was that kind of coach that wanted to be out there. I think in any case, I'm not sure that Coach K would be sitting at Jalen Johnson's table on draft night in a normal world if he was like Calipari and was the kind of guy that went around to stuff like that. So I'm not sure what that answer is. NBA teams have to be sure they know what that answer is. So, and that's the real question of Jalen Johnson. All of the other things on the court, the man is fantastic, but it can only take you so far. And if coaches think you're going to be, or teams think you're going to be a guy that's going to shake up the chemistry and take it in a downward track, or just be a guy that commands all the attention, and when they don't get that attention, decide to want to trade or leave or somehow disrupt the process that they have, that is a big red flag for a lot of teams. Coachability, again, is another one. And if you can't be coached and you can't take criticism, you can't, if you shut down and kind of, go away from the team when things get hard. Teams want to know how you're going to react to that. And right now, on paper, his track record does not look good. So he has to answer those questions, and he has to answer them well.
Jay talked about how there is a depth of talent in this draft, and that obviously hurts everybody involved because then there are more guys around you and you can get pushed down. But I think for a guy like Jalen Johnson, who has clear strengths and also what appear to be clear weaknesses in his ability to compete, he can get hurt very badly by that, because any given GM can, as you guys said, go through that interview with him, not be satisfied, and be like, all right, fine. There are other guys in this draft that are exciting. There are other guys that are athletic. There are other guys that produced and have track records that are longer than Jalen Johnson's. So I'm not going to spend the 10th pick, the 11th pick, the 12th pick. I don't need to do that. And so he may fall farther than that. Now, on the flip side, you can be much more transactional when you evaluate him and say, look, it hasn't worked in these other places, but those places were not the NBA. And when Jalen was given, when he took his time to leave the program and go get ready, he showed out really well, and he performed well at the combine. He had good measurables, and he got, some of the best attention from that relative to his rep coming out of school, out of the end of the school year. So you could say, look, all that he accomplished in high school and in college doesn't really matter. Being an NCAA champion or making the NCAA tournament or being an All-American, none of that affects your ability to perform at the NBA level. And I think you'll hear GMs say that. One of the most disappointing things that you guys also pointed out was that we haven't gotten answers to the questions about why he left. And there was a Charlotte Observer article that our old buddy John Alexander wrote the other day, where he asked Jalen Johnson, so why'd you leave Duke? And he gave that stock answer. And I think the headline on the article, the three of us were talking about this, the headline on the article was Jalen Johnson explains why he left Duke. And he really didn't. He hasn't explained that yet. And maybe he has behind closed doors to decision makers, to NBA decision makers, but we haven't heard it. And it's going to be tough, I think, for Duke fans to really embrace it. And look, I think that there's an explanation for him that would make me satisfied and say, all right, he actually did the best thing for him. But it does feel like he sort of went the quitter route when it came to deciding to end his college career, because there wasn't that much time left, and he's not going to get that time back.
And it's funny you mentioned that word, quit, right? When this happened, we were very quick to not use that word because we didn't know any of the answers. We didn't know any of the explanations, right? So we decided, hey, we can't call him a quitter because we don't know what's really going on, and it's unfair to speculate and assume, right? But Jay used that word when describing Jalen Johnson and describing the instance that went down. And honestly, these questions are not going to end in these boardrooms when he's going in for interviews and for workouts. On draft night, when he gets drafted, this question will come up. It's without hesitation one of the first questions that are going to come out after, like, how do you feel about going to insert team, is going to be, hey, you left Duke. What was the reason behind that? You left your high school. What was the reason behind that? And he's going to have to be ready for that answer. That's where you maybe can give more of a stock answer, but you have to be able to explain yourself, because that is your first impression on a new fan base. And if they can't trust you, they're going to be out there questioning why their team drafted you in the first place. So I'm very curious to see what comes down the road from Jalen Johnson on that, because honestly, if he can get that out of the way, we're talking about a top 5, top 6, top 7 talent in this draft.
Yeah. So I will tell you guys that I think the important call, the important conversation about Jalen Johnson is not only Jalen talking to teams. NBA teams are going to reach out to Coach K. They're going to ask him, and those conversations are private conversations. These things will not leak to the media, but there's going to be GMs out there, especially because several of them are Dukies, players who played for Coach K who are now in front offices. God, there's a ton of them, both as GMs and assistant GMs, player personnel, all that stuff. They're going to reach out to Coach K and say, hey, give us your impression of this guy, and give us your take on him leaving the team, with a half dozen games to go. And it's going to be very interesting to hear what Coach K, we probably won't hear, but if you see Jalen dropping a lot, it's entirely possible that Coach K told teams something they didn't want to hear.
He probably already has. They probably have already had some of these conversations because, again, this process probably started when he left Duke. And, it's just like, when guys go through the draft process before they decide whether or not they're going to leave Duke, a lot of people will call, say, hey, what do you think about this guy or that guy? And those conversations have probably already started. There's probably some who will call him back, but I think, when he entered Duke, he was considered a top 4 pick by a lot of people. Now we're talking about whether or not he gets drafted in the mid to late lottery or even the mid first round after the lottery. So teams have already started to kind of walk away or distance themselves from the possibility of drafting Jalen Johnson for whatever reason. That's going to be, again, it's the one big question for me. If I had one big question over my head that's stopping people from wanting to have me, I'm getting rid of that, dispelling that notion immediately. There's something that is off about it. And again, I'm curious to see what that is.
All right, guys. So it's over under time on Jalen Johnson. We've done this on the other Dukies. Time for the last one. And I'm setting the over under at 15, the middle of the first round. Does Jalen Johnson go in the top half of the first round or the bottom half of the first round? Donald, I'll come to you first. What do you think?
This is very hard. I'm going to go push. I know we go over under, but I think 15 is where he gets
Donald,
drafted.
you got to commit.
No.
Stop
I'm sorry,
that.
man. But okay, so wait. So 15 is then 1 to 15. So your question is 1 to 15 or 16 to 16 or beyond.
Okay,
16
so
to 30
I think
essentially, because there's no way Jalen Johnson.
No, it's after the 15th pick, and then within 2 minutes after the 15th pick is Jalen Johnson in the NBA.
So basically you're saying the over under is pick 15 and a half.
Yes.
And I'm going to go over. I say that the Washington Wizards draft Jalen Johnson with the 15th pick.
There we go. Sam?
I'm going under. I think that individual GMs are going to get scared off by enough things that they're going to talk themselves out of Jalen Johnson, and he may be one of those guys that falls a lot farther than his talent would indicate that he should.
Yeah, on talent alone, he's a top 10 pick. But I agree. I think that if you're a GM, you want to succeed, but the thing you really don't want to do is you really don't want to fail. You don't want to have a disaster. And I think if you take this guy and he turns out that he's problematic for you, everyone's going to say, well, you should have seen that coming. What kind of a GM are you? And I think that's going to scare some guys off. And so I think that he will last into the late teens. But I think he'll be off the board by 20 or so.
And I think, honestly, the reason why I'm saying that the Washington Wizards are the team that I could see picking him at 15 is because they have one guy who is the opposite of anything that we just talked about, the word quitter or anything like that. And that's Russell Westbrook. And when you have a guy that has these issues or has this question mark over their head, you put him next to someone who is just a grinder, who's just going to make sure that that dude never, ever has the word quitter or tenacity, like all those questions. None of that will be hanging over his head ever again, because Russell Westbrook will take him under his wing and he will teach him how to play NBA basketball and to do it the right way. So that is something where I think the GMs and the scouts over here down the street from me are probably thinking, okay, if we can get him in a room in a camp with Russell Westbrook, then maybe this talent will emerge and all the other questions can be taught out of him or forced out of him by just being around a guy who just does nothing but play basketball all day.
You know, the team that I think takes a flyer on him, Oklahoma City has 3 picks in the first round. They've got the number 6 and then the number 16 and 18. And they have OKC has a ton of draft picks over the next several years. They traded away all their good players in recent years, and they have acquired just a ridiculous number of draft picks. That's the type of team that can go, hey, you know what? I'll take at number 16 or number 18. I'm getting a guy who's a top 10 talent. If it doesn't work out in Oklahoma City, they'll just go, fine. What the heck? Because they're going to have so many young guys on their roster that they can afford to take flyers and jettison guys who, you know, are questionable for one reason or another. So that's why, assuming he's still there, I would think Oklahoma City, all the question mark guys who could be great, but there's something weird hanging about them. Oklahoma City's gonna be drafting those guys constantly over the next several years because they can afford to.
If they keep the draft picks, because they are definitely actively seeking to take some of those picks and package them to move up in the draft.
Yes. So that's going to wrap it up for us here on episode 329. Donald and Sam, thanks a lot for being with me. Jay Bilas, of course, thank you so much for joining us for all three of these episodes. Hey, we'll be back very soon on the Duke Basketball Report podcast with Olympic talk. We are certainly following developments on the recruiting trail as well, where there are several top Duke targets playing in the Peach Jam showcased in Augusta this week. And it sure seems like college sports are about to undergo a major shift, with Texas and Oklahoma eyeing the SEC. Who knows what dominoes will fall after that? But we'll get to all of that on future episodes. Just because it's the summer doesn't mean we're taking any time off here on the DBR podcast. For Donald and Sam, I'm Jason Evans. Again, this is episode 329. It's time for the Duke Band to play us out and take us home.